In example 4, we need to solve the triangle or triangles if the measure of angle A is 51 degrees, B is 7, and C is 10. Let's draw this triangle, and that might help us figure out whether we need to use the law of sines or the law of cosines. Don't know if any one of these angles is 90 degrees here. Measure of angle A definitely isn't. And we don't know the other two. So we can't use the Pythagorean theorem or our regular sine-cosine tangent relationships, our regular trig function relationships. Let's just make this A over here. That's 51 degrees. We can make this B if you want. So that's 7. And then this one, angle C would be here, so side C would be over here. If we look at this, it's a side angle side. And so we don't have to worry about that whole case 1 or case 2 thing. If there's 0 possibilities, 1 or 2. We don't have an angle side side, so we don't have to worry about that. There's just one case for this, or one solution. So we do need to find the measure of angle B. We do need to find the measure of angle C, and we don't have A up here. So these are the 3 pieces of information that are missing from the triangle. When we're asked to solve the triangle, that's what we're asked to do, find those missing pieces. If we look at 10 here and look at angle C, which we don't know, that might be an issue for us. And we have, we have side B, but not angle B. So we can't really set up the law of sines with these 2 angles and their opposite sides because there's 2 unknowns. We also don't know what the opposite side A is here. So if we try to use this angle and we don't know its opposite side with a side and the angle we don't know over here, we'll again have 2 unknowns. You could try that all day, but this is totally a case where we need to use the law of cosines. So for the law of cosines, we need to think a little bit about this. We know B and C, and we know the measure of angle A. So if I wrote the law of cosines using A first, that would be B squared plus C squared minus 2BC times the cosine of angle A. We know B and C, and we know A, so now we just have the one unknown if you're choosing which form of this to use. Just think about it beforehand. You'll see that A here is something that we need to solve for, and we'll have B and C, and it will make sense. Don't worry if you write this down and you fill stuff in, substitute some things in, and it doesn't quite work. You know, if you have 2 unknowns, just go back and try a different one. You'll find one there's only 3 to choose from. So we have A squared is equal to B squared, so that's 7 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 7 times 10 times the cosine of 51 degrees. If you want, you can type this whole thing in, and keep in mind this is a very common student error for students to forget to take the square root. So if you're going to do this, if you just want to solve for A, you've got to take the square root of that whole thing. Whether you do that in your calculator one whole step or figure out what this is then square root it, either way is fine. I prefer to just type everything in underneath the radical sign and then take the square root of that in just a second here. But if you have trouble remembering about that, then you might just have to type in the whole square root sign, and that's fine. Cosine of 51, so then I'll hit enter, and I know I have to take the square root. And then I'm just going to use my answer function, so I'll just do second and then answer here. And that should get me about 7.8. So A we find is about 7.8. And now we need to find some angles. I'll write that on our triangle here as we found it. Now we have angle A and its opposite side. And then we can use the law of sines to set up these other to find the other angles. So if we use the law of sines to find measure of angle B, it's going to be the sine of B over 7, and that's going to be equal to the sine of A, which we know is 51, over its opposite side, which is approximately 7.8. When we solve, we'll multiply by 7, and then remember we'll have to do the inverse here if we're looking at finding an angle. So let's try that. We've got the inverse of sine, and then that's going to be 7 sine of 51 divided by 7.8. and we get about 44.2 degrees. So B is about 44.2. We can put that up here. You could, if you wanted to now, just do 51 plus 44.2 and take that away from 180. I like to make sure that I've got my math right, so I just run this whole setup again, except I'm going to do it with C. So I've got the sine of C over its opposite side, which is 10, is equal to the sine of 51 over 7.8. We know we're going to have to multiply each side by 10, and then we're just going to need to do the inverse here. If you look at this though, it's very similar to this one. The only thing that's different is the 10. So we can just hit second enter, and then if you prefer, you can just add a 10 in there instead of that 7. You'll have to hit the second delete button, which will insert something in whatever you'd like into the to the equation there. And that's about 85.1 degrees. Then, as a check to make sure that I've set up my other ratios correctly, I just take 85.1, I add 44.2, which was the measure of angle B, and then I add 51. And we get 180.3. The reason why this is off is because we've rounded a little bit, so don't worry too much about that. It's super close to 180 degrees, which is exactly what we're looking for. The solution to this problem, when it asks you to solve the triangle, which means find the missing sides and missing angles, is just right here in the box.